Better thinking, faster decisions, bigger ROI. This is the Finding 12 Minutes podcast. The idea is simple. If you can find 12 minutes of efficiency in your day, you will gain an hour every week, and that changes how we work. Each episode is focused on practical ways to use AI, technology, and smarter strategies to help you move faster, think clearer, and get more done with less effort. So let's find your 12 minutes. So every company is now becoming a software company, whether they intended to or not. So in this episode, I want to kind of focus on the challenge that most organizations are still structured like service companies or manufacturers or consultants, contractors, utilities, or whatever. And for the most part, they're selling expertise. Some sell labor, others are selling projects, some are selling, software, maybe even physical products. But meanwhile, the highest growth companies are starting to embed, software directly into the value that they delivered. And so this concept, which was initially developed by Palantir and has, at the Gartner conference last week was brought up again. And I've heard this for the last year or so around this whole concept of a forward deployed engineer, and that forward deploy engineer being a bridge to kind of solve that gap between these companies, traditional companies that are now becoming software companies. So, this concept of the rise of the forward deploy engineer, and I think there's some misconceptions exactly of what that is, but, it's been referred to as maybe just an alternative to the consulting model. Alternative ways to kind of think about this is, every company needs a forward deployed engineer. Consultants, how do you go from kind of scaling to where you are today to where you need to be tomorrow? So as many organizations are trying to build these technology businesses inside their traditional businesses, what you're finding is that engineering firms, architects, construction firms are now building software. Consultants are building AI tools and software. Construction companies are building platforms. Financial advisors are building, client portals. Law firms are building these knowledge systems and knowledge centers. And the mistake that we're assuming is that software development alone really kind of solves this problem. But the real challenge is just creating people who deeply understand both the customer problem and the need, the technology and the need to solve it. And this is where that forward deployed engineer comes in. So some opening questions to kind of think about: what happens when a consulting firm starts building software? What happens when a design and engineering company starts selling technology and software? Or what happens when an architecture firm realizes that its most valuable asset isn't their drawings anymore, and it's the data behind them? Most of these organizations start by hiring developers. Very few are looking at it from a forward deployed engineering perspective. And that's often the difference between a technology investment and a technology business. So one of the core points I want to kind of focus on is that we need to stop starting with the technology. Most traditional organizations start with, we should build an app. We have an app. We should build an AI assistant. We should build an AI chatbot. Well, we should create a platform. And all of these are really the wrong starting points. A forward deploy engineer starts with, what problem are our customers repeatedly paying us to solve? And does that opportunity usually hide within existing services? So for example, when you think about forward deployed engineers, could you be solving proposal development, project delivery, asset management? How about compliance reporting? Knowledge management, access to knowledge is always going to be key. Client communications. Then the software kind of emerges from those services and not the other way around. The second core point that I really want to make is that we need to put the builders next to the customers. Many companies isolate their software developers. They sit within IT, they sit within product teams, they sit behind ticketing systems. Whereas a forward deploy engineer works directly with operations, works directly with your customers, works directly with project teams. This dramatically shortens the cycle between problem, insight, and solution. And instead of gathering requirements for 6 months, they observe the work firsthand and they become translators of the business and the technology. So then the question becomes, that does sound like a consultant. Well, the difference is that you hire an external consultant to come do this to help advise the business, where this is an internal consultant that does that becomes the translator between the business and the technology. And that's key. The third point I want to kind of make is that when you find your internal forward deployed engineers, The interesting, like where do you find them? And the interesting is many companies already have them. They're just not called engineers. They look for project managers that automate everything, a marketer that's building chatbots, operations leader leading workflows, an analyst writing Python scripts, even an estimator that's using AI to accelerate their work. These people understand both the business process and the technology, and they're often the first product team. They're the ones that are sitting on the front lines. They are seeing the customer needs. They are seeing the things that the customer is struggling with and how your organization is solving those. My next core point is, how do you productize what you repeatedly deliver? And that's one of the biggest lessons from AI adoption. If you've solved the same problem 100 times, there's probably a software hiding inside of it. So you ask yourself, what do the clients repeatedly ask for? What do they repeatedly create? What do they repeatedly we need to repeatedly explain? How or what do we repeatedly calculate? These repetitive activities often become products, and a forward deployed engineer helps identify those opportunities to kind of create those solutions. So you're looking at what the client is really needing. What is that problem to what we can actually solve through our services? The next core point, or my last core point, is that we need to be thinking revenue, not efficiency. Many AI and technology investments are framed around this whole concept of cost reduction. And while that's important, it is not the only thing that we need to be focused on. If it's only about efficiency, what you're going to find is, and in previous episodes, we've kind of talked about this, is that the ROI, or the investment in the AI technology in and of itself, is not necessarily being directly related back to a return. So the questions that you would want to ask yourself is can we create a subscription? They keep talking about the SaaS apocalypse, that SaaS is going away. But just like the whole concept of cloud computing, all you're doing is moving it from your computer to somebody else's computer, and it just happens to be on the internet. We talk about SaaS subscriptions going away, and the reality is that it's not. It's just paying somebody different. You can even come back and talk about it from a consumer perspective. We wanted to cut cable. We got to get rid of all the big cable providers. And all we did was recreate cable in the aggregate, but with all these other software subscriptions. So we were paying one subscription. We weren't happy with it. We were saying that it was going away. And now we're just paying a different subscription. So when you think about that, can we create a subscription? You could, but you're moving money from one subscription to the next subscription. Can you create a platform? And I think this is where the biggest value comes in. I think platforms are immensely valuable to organizations. It keeps your customers connected to all your services and offerings. We want to talk about upsell and cross-sell, creating a platform that kind of creates that mechanism to where your customers have access to everything that you do and can solve any problem that they have is going to be vital to this kind of activity. Going back to the subscription models, you need to be thinking about how can we create reoccurring revenue? Why did most software companies shift from license-based to SaaS-based? Well, they wanted reoccurring revenue. They didn't want you to spend $1,000 on a license just to turn around and not renew that license or upgrade that license or do anything to that license for 2 or 3 years and just use the software as. What they wanted is they wanted a monthly payment out of you. So you have to be thinking about where does that monthly recurring revenue come from? And then lastly, and this is like, how do we scale our expertise without scaling headcount? And I think this is what, like, we talk about this from an AI perspective, that we add AI and we could reduce headcount. Well, the reality is I think we need to be thinking about it slightly different. I think we need to be thinking about is how do we keep the existing headcount that we have, but scale it to the point to where we're actually operating at a higher volume. So how do we get 3 people to operate like 5 people? How do we get 5 people to operate like 10 people? How do we scale that to deliver the things that our customers need without actually growing our headcount? So that's how organizations move from being service providers to technology-enabled businesses. So some practical actions that we could be thinking about when it comes to this concept of a forward deploy engineer. Again, yes, while it does feel like it feels like a consulting model, the big difference is the consultant is actually your employees and you're not hiring externally. So it's really getting traditional organizations to think about operating like consultants, but for their own purposes. And they're not outsourcing it to a third party. You're not hiring somebody to come in to do these things for you. You're using your existing staff. You may hire somebody, but they are going to be an employee of yours and they're not going to be a contractor or what you call a traditional consultant. So if you are a traditional service organization, and I've said this numerous times, let's identify one repetitive client problem. Start with the problem, not the tool. Start with the problem, not the technology. If you're starting anywhere else, the reality is that you are not starting in the right spot. The next thing that you want to do is find the person closest to the customer and the technology. And I think that's hard. And I think where you think about that you either have people that are very connected to the customer, but that don't understand the technology, or understand the technology too well and don't understand the customer. But you need to find the person that can actually do both of those. Give them time to experiment would be the third one that I would think about. Give them time to kind of look at what technology can do, how it can solve problems. Then you really want to kind of get into that rapid prototyping. You want to build that prototype, not a platform. Stop thinking about a 100% delivered solution and start thinking about it from an incremental perspective. What is my MVP today? Knowing that I'm going to do a sprint and I'm going to increment it in 6 weeks and 6 weeks and 6 weeks, and then get to a platform. Build the prototype, not the platform to start. Then test it with real users. And if you start with your customers and your customers' need and your customers' problems, and then you start with the people that are using it internally, what you're going to find is you're going to have a much better solution. So that forward deploy engineer kind of solves some of those things. And then finally, what you want to do is you want to measure revenue impact, not just efficiency. How is this impacting revenue? Are we selling more? If we sell 4 services and the customer is only buying one of them, are we able to move them upstream and sell them 2 services, 3 servers, et cetera? So what you really want to do is you want to start small. I guess that's the more practical lesson in all of this. Find your version of those 12 minutes and then scale it. So wrapping this episode up, the future isn't that every company becomes a software company. The future is that every company becomes a problem-solving company that happens to use software. The organizations that win won't necessarily have the best developers. They'll have the people closest to the customer, closest to the work, closest to the opportunity. Those people are the forward deployed engineers, and they may already be sitting with your new organization. So this ultimately aligns well with the broader Finding 12 Minutes theme, because it moves the conversation from AI as an efficiency tool, as AI as a business enabler tool. And the real opportunity isn't saving 12 minutes. It's using those 12 minutes to discover the next product, platform, or revenue stream. So go find your forward deployed engineer and start moving closer to what problems your customers have. That's going to help you grow those revenues. And that's your 12 minutes. If you found value in this, share it with someone who needs to work smarter, not harder. And remember, small efficiencies compound. Find 12 minutes a day and the results take care of themselves. I'll see you in the next episode.